All right, welcome to this training section where we are going to be talking about managing availability. Okay, so this is going to be a very important training because what ends up happening is that if you don't have a good system or a good strategy to manage availability, then it can sometimes get overwhelming. And the reason why it can get overwhelming is because there are three places where you can actually manage your booking calendar, your scheduler's availability. Okay, so you can manage it on the global availability client kit side. You can manage it on the calendar specific availability on the client kit side. And then you can also manage it on the central calendar availability, Google Calendar side. Man, okay, my brain is blowing up. This is too much. Okay, yes, that's exactly why we're making this training section, because here's the thing, right? So you can actually go over here to settings, and then you can go over to calendars, and then you can go over to availability, and you can change the availability on the entire account over here, right? Or you could also then change the availability. If I went over here to edit, and then I go to availability here, I can change the availability on the actual calendar level, right? The booking calendar scheduler level. And then I can also go into actual Google Calendar. I can say, you know what? I want to go ahead and manage availability by blocking off here. And then I could manage it over here. And so this is a diagram that shows you that two of those methods are on the client kit side. So there is a global availability that I showed you, and then there is the actual calendar specific availability. And then there is a central calendar, the Google Calendar side, that it can also happen over there. And so this is exactly why I am saying pay attention here, because it can be confusing. This is where a lot of new business owners kind of get tripped up because they can't figure out a system or a strategy on how to actually manage their availability and all of kind of the moving pieces here. And so that's the reason why what we're going to do here is we're actually going to teach you how to think about this. We're going to give you the foundational principles that are a part of the strategy, because here's the thing, right? The tool is Google Calendar. Hey, here's Google Calendar. It's free. Go use it. Here's Client Kit, right? This is an amazing software that we were able to go ahead and partner up with so that way you can have access to it. Hey, cool, go use it. But where's the strategy behind it? Where's the actual method of using it, right? It's not just about the tool. It's about the system and the strategy that that tool is put into. So let's actually go ahead and talk about what our recommended strategy for managing availability is going to be. So typically what we like to do is that we like to leave global availability wide open. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you what I mean by this. We go back over here to calendars. We go over to availability. This is going to be global availability. This is a separate training section that we helped you set up previously. What we would recommend is that you leave this as wide open as possible. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and leave it open from, let's say, 4 a.m. to even like 9 p.m., you can go ahead and do that, copy to all, not an issue. The reason why is because in just a second, what we're going to say is that, hey, we would recommend that you control your availability from Google Calendar. And so as long as you have an event that is blocking off 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., right? That's the reason why we made that morning event. And as long as, right, 9 p.m. is over here, as long as you have an event inside of Google Calendar that is blocking off, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., it doesn't matter if you leave this wide open, because this event, because of the integration, because of checking with the conflicts, this event is going to go ahead and actually stop anyone from being able to go ahead and book over this slot. And so that way, when you leave this wide open, you don't have to worry about this at all, right? And so that's the reason why global availability, we would recommend that you leave that wide open. And then the calendar specific availability, okay, so we go over here to calendars, we go over to the actual calendar that we might have set up. Now, right now, we only have one calendar set up, right? But let's say hypothetically, I had another calendar. I'm just going to make one very, very quickly to show you how easy it is, as well as just show you what it could look like. So we have the one-on-one consult calendar, but let's say, for example, I was going to make a welcome call calendar, right? So welcome call is going to be for new clients. I'm just going to make this really quickly. This is going to be NFW welcome. This is going to be for NutriFit Wellness welcome, 30 minutes, no problem. Cool. This is going to be that availability. I'm going to go ahead and confirm. Close. Okay, cool. Now I got two calendars, right? Welcome call calendar. So what you can do is that you can actually set the availability on the calendar specific level, okay? So what we would recommend is that typically, even on the calendar specific level, we would recommend leaving it wide open, because what that's gonna do is gonna allow you to be able to book welcome calls and one-on-one consults anytime that there is a free slot open, okay? Now, that is typically in general what the recommendation is gonna be, unless you have an exception. Let's say hypothetically, you only wanna take welcome calls in the morning. Well, in that case, you can't leave it wide open, because according to the settings that we have right now, if I go over to edit, I go over to availability, you'll see that the current settings on the welcome call calendar allow it to be booked all the way until 5 p.m. Now, Normally, you don't want to restrict this because you want to be able to so you can maximize your work hours, right? So let's say, for example, a client can't make it in the morning. You want to be able to have a welcome call with them in the evening or the afternoon. You can go ahead and do that, right? So what you would normally do is that you would leave this wide open. But let's say in some extreme exception situation where when we get into the actual specific calendar setups, we'll walk you through this, but this is just kind of general principles that you can walk through, right? It's like, okay, let's say welcome calls, I only want to do in the morning. Well, what I can do is I can do it and say, you know what, I'm going to set this to only be up until 12 p.m. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit copy to all, apply, okay? And then I don't want to take them on Sundays, but I will take them on Saturdays. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now, what you're going to see is, check this out, okay? I'm going to go ahead and hit close. I'm going to go over to the welcome call share. I'm going to go ahead and grab the permanent link. I'm going to go ahead and open this up in an incognito window. If you want to know what the hotkey, the shortcut, the keyboard shortcut for opening an incognito window is on Google Chrome, it's actually Command Shift and then the N, the letter N. So if you hit that, it'll actually open up. You'll see it opens up multiple incognito windows. Command Shift N is the way that you can actually go ahead and do that as a hotkey. Or if you don't want to do that as a hotkey keyboard shortcut, you can always go ahead and click there, and then you'll see new incognito window, and then it gives you the hotkey right there, right? So you see that hotkey, it gives you right there. Okay, cool. So anyways, right here we can go ahead and paste Command Shift, Command V to paste the actual link on here, and you'll see what it does is it actually goes ahead. Welcome call calendar only allows me to book up until 11:30 because remember this is in 30-minute increments. That's the settings that we have on there. So it only blocks that off there. Now, the other thing that you'll notice, if I go ahead and look at this and compare this with my calendar, you'll see that on the 21st, I have an appointment with David John at 9 and at 10 a.m., right? So therefore, on the 21st, you'll see that it does not show 9 and 10 a.m. in here because it knows based off of the central calendar integration that I already have appointments booked there. So it's not going to allow anybody else new to book on there. Okay. So typically what we are going to recommend is that you do leave that availability even on the calendar specific wide open, unless you have a specific case scenario where you're not going to do that, right? So availability, you can even come over here and put this at like super wide open. You can go 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. And the reason, again, that it's not going to matter if you do this is because it's always going to look at your Google Calendar. And as long as you have this morning and this night event, then it is going to go ahead and restrict the hours that somebody can actually book. And so again, there is a method to the madness. This is the reason why we're walking you through the system and the strategy and the reason why we had you create those events in a previous training section. So that way you could actually later on, you see, we've done this a while. This is not our first rodeo. We've actually done this a couple times before, like a couple hundred times. And so we know what to expect. And that's exactly what we're teaching you with that system. So that way we know, hey, this system works because later on, this is what we're going to be able to use as a part of the system. And so that is going to be the calendar specific. You can go ahead and repeat that again for, let's say, the one-on-one consult. You can go ahead and hit edit and then change the availability wide open there. And then this is going to be where most of the time what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and control your availability from Google Calendar, okay? So that way, if you do have, let's say, for example, like, gym, lunch, you got your kids' appointments, whatever, it's so easy to go ahead and just move appointments just like this. Look at this. I'm just moving appointments left and right? And then over here, let's say, for example, at 12, I want to do lunch, okay? If at 12, I'm going to do lunch, well, guess what? All I got to do, check this out, right? I'm going to show it to you right here. 12, I moved the lunch over here with Google Calendar, right? 12 p.m. on the 21st is going to be lunch. What I do is I open an incognito window, I go over here, and then I go over the 21st, and guess what? It's not going to show me 12 p.m. And the reason it's not going to show me 12 p.m. is because it read the Google Calendar. And so see how easy it was for me to go ahead and literally change the availability on this calendar just by changing on the Google Calendar side. So that way it's so much easier rather than you having to go into each calendar, go to availability, go over here, go to the 21st, and then decide, hey, am I available this time? It's too complex. And that's the reason why our recommendation, even though the tool allows you to be able to do a lot of stuff, right? But you don't want to get overwhelmed. You want to be running your business. You don't want to be messing around with the small stuff here and there. And so that's the reason why this is the recommended strategy of managing your availability on the Google Calendar side. Now, the other important piece of this, pay attention because it's very, very, very important, okay, is that whenever you want to actually go ahead and change a client's appointment, we would recommend that you actually do that inside of ClientKit. Whenever you need to change a Google Calendar appointment, you do that in Google Calendar. Let me show you what I mean by this, okay? So let's say, for example, I need to reschedule Dwayne Johnson's appointment, right? So let me zoom in so you can see a little bit more. So let's say, for example, I need to reschedule Dwayne Johnson's appointment. Yes, Google Calendar allows me to move it. However, this is not the right approach. Let me go ahead and put a massive X over here, okay? This is not the way that you want to do it when it comes to client appointments that have been booked through ClientKit. What you want to do is you want to go ahead and follow the training section, because there's a whole separate training section. We walk you through how to reschedule appointments, how to cancel appointments. But real quick, kind of a spoiler alert here, right? All you do is you go over to Calendar tab, find that Dwayne Johnson appointment, and then you go ahead and reschedule it from the system here inside of ClientKit. That you do not do that via Google Calendar. Very important, okay? And then when it comes to Google Calendar appointments, let's say, for example, lunch, that is not going to be something that I can actually move here, right? So right here, here's the lunch, right? You'll see I can't move this. It doesn't allow me to edit it. And the reason it doesn't allow me to edit it is because this is actually a Google Calendar appointment that cannot be edited from ClientKit. And so what you want to do in your head is you want to go ahead and create a separation. Whenever anything is for business purposes, whenever anything is for client purposes, all of that is going to happen inside of ClientKit. And whenever there is a Google Calendar type of event, that is going to happen inside of Google Calendar. You want to create that separation in your head. You want to make that into a habit, so that way you don't mess around and say, okay, I'm just going to move this appointment. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. No. You want to understand when and where you actually have to be able to move appointments and manage your availability that way. And so that's exactly the reminder that we have inside of the guide here as well. Is like, hey, this is the recommendation. Otherwise, it can get very messy very quickly. In Google Calendar, this is just going to be very fast because I already said this to you, but I want to go ahead and emphasize it one more time. In Google Calendar, only move your personal appointments around or any appointments that you have around Google Calendar. In ClientKit, move your booking calendar appointments only. So if you have a doctor's appointment that you have put on your Google Calendar, you cannot move that in ClientKit. You have to move that in Google Calendar, okay? But if you have a client appointment that was created from your booking calendar, aka all of these, right? Dwayne Johnson, David John, LeBron James, all these, what you're going to do is you're going to move that inside of ClientKit. So having this separation in your mind is going to allow you to make sure that you're keeping things nice and organized and that your system is not getting messed up, because sometimes the software, if you go into here and you actually try to move the appointment here, right, what it's going to do is sometimes it's going to mess up how it actually ends up being inside of ClientKit, and you don't want to do that because then it could mess up your notifications and the reminders that we're going to help you get set up later on. And so again, the tool allows you to, but just because the tool allows you to, you got to follow the system and the strategy so that way you are rocking and rolling here, okay? Next up, let's talk about availability troubleshooting. This is very important. Whatever availability that you want to have shown up on your calendar here, right? Your availability here. This availability is going to ultimately be based off of what is located here inside of this calendar here, okay? And so if you are ever wondering like, hey, how come, 4 p.m. on the 23rd is showing up? Or how come, 10:30 a.m. on the 22nd is showing up? What you can do is you go, cool, 22nd, 10:30 a.m. Well, guess what? I don't have any appointment at 10:30 a.m. on the 22nd. That's why it's showing up on the calendar. And so if you're ever wondering like, hey, why is it showing up the way that it is? Always make sure to reference the calendars tab here in ClientKit, because this is ultimately what the booking calendar is going to pull from. And then also there is additional settings there as well. So if you go over to settings and then I go over to calendars and then I go over to edit, and then I go over to availability. Right here at the bottom where you have meeting interval, meeting duration, minimum scheduling notice, date range, all of this has a big impact on what shows up on the actual booking calendar as well, right? So minimum scheduling notice, if I put this at, let's say 12 hours, and then let's say the date range, which is going to be the maximum date range that they can book. Let's just say I put this at 3 days, okay? And then buffer time, that's it. I hit save. That is going to have a big impact. You'll see right now, it's going to allow me, it's going to say, cool, no slots available, because if I refresh those settings that I just saved right now, you'll see, boom, it doesn't allow me to book more than a couple days out. And right now, it's probably because I have this entire Friday that's blocked off. I have to go ahead and take that out. And then you'll see this 23rd is not available right now. But if I go ahead and refresh, and then if the Google Calendar integration comes in time, because sometimes it does take a minute. So right now it looks like it did not show up just yet. So the reason is because watch this. If I go back, go to calendars, right now, Friday looks like it is open up for me here, right? So now I should be able to go ahead and refresh and see if it shows up. Okay, so it's still not showing up, and that probably means, and this is where you're going to learn this skill, right? This is a skill that you kind of just have to know where all these different settings are, and then that's going to allow you to mess around with it a little bit more. I'm thinking that the reason why the 23rd is not opening up right now is because right now it's the 20th, and it's set to only open up 3 days in advance. So let's do 4 days in advance, hit save, and then let's see if that makes a change. So I hit save, let that load. I'm going to go ahead and refresh. and 23rd, there we go. 23rd shows up. So that's exactly what you got to look at, right? So was it the actual calendar event? It was probably the calendar event that I had on here that I had to delete, and then I had to wait for it to integrate, and then I had to go in and check the availability and check the settings here as well. And so this is where you're kind of understanding, you're unlocking the doors in your mind where all these settings are in the business platform, so that way you're not overwhelmed when it comes time to actually be running your business, because you understand, hey, how do I actually troubleshoot the availability? Well, guess what? This is what you're basically unlocking right now. And so our recommendation is that really go out there and take the time to play around with the business platform exactly the way that you saw me do right now. Take the time to make sure that it is super fine-tuned in, right? So you want to go in and actually test out based off the different calendars, check your, calendar specific availability, check your global availability, make sure you're checking, hey, how does it look like on Google Calendar? Just run through a couple different tests, kind of imagine you are an example situation, right? Put a situation there and say, okay, cool. If a client was going to try to do this, if a client was going to try to do that, try and run through it as many times as possible, because remember, the more repetition that you get from this, right? Skill equals knowledge times reps. Yes, this training video gave you the knowledge, but until you actually go out there, pause this training, go in there, do the dang work, you're not going to have any repetition to be able to unlock the skill, to be able to have higher levels of learning. So that way you can get to the point where you are competent, you are a professional, you're reaching those levels of mastery that are going to be critical for this. Now, the last thing I want to go ahead and mention before we close out this training here is that whatever we just said, is this gospel? Is this Quran? Does this mean like, hey, has to be exactly what it is? No, the system and strategy that we just shared with you is the recommendation that we have used ourselves in most of the situations, okay? However, depending on your situation, depending on use case, the system and the strategy may be different, right? So it may be depending on different situations, if you're going on vacation, the different types of appointments, if you're booking a coaching call versus an onboarding call versus a consultation call versus an in-person session. Maybe you only do your in-person sessions in the morning. Maybe you only do your in-person sessions in the afternoon, right? All of that is going to have an impact. But the point of this was to open your mind up and teach you the basic principles of where all these settings are, so that way you can be empowered and you can know how to be able to make these changes yourself. And you are not stuck to the hip. You are not a slave to any single person because of the fact that you understand, hey, I now understand the tools and the principles. I can do this myself. And at the end of the day, guess what? We're not going to be able to predict every single new business owner and every single new student situation. This is the reason why this is a community. We are all learning from each other and helping each other on the mountain. There is no guru on the mountain that has all the answers. And so if you learn something, if you learn, hey, this specific use case it was helpful for me, it might be helpful for somebody else. If you're struggling with like, hey, you know what? I have this specific use case. I'm not sure how I would best actually do this. Well, guess what? Ask in the community, because all of the most up-to-date learning happens in the community. These courses and these trainings are just stuff that we actually go ahead and create way after all the learning has happened in the community, right? So all of the best practices only get documented, but the courses and these trainings take a long time for us to make. And so the most up-to-date learnings are always going to be inside of the community. So you want to make sure that you are sharing, you're up to date with that, because unless you share, other people are not going to share. So it is a give and ask cycle that you need to make sure that you are contributing to if you want to actually get value from all of this. And so with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this has been this training on how to actually manage and troubleshoot availability. You are becoming an absolute pro at this as long as you go out there and actually do the repetition to play around with what it is that we talked about inside of this training section. And so we're not done yet. We got to walk through a couple extra steps in order to really make you an absolute professional, an absolute master when it comes to the calendar and scheduling. We're spending a lot of time on this because scheduler and calendar is something that you're going to be using quite a lot. And so that's the reason why it's so important to make sure that you are very well versed in all of the different aspects of it and what it can do and what the best strategy and system for it is going to be. So with that being said, we will catch you in the next training section.